Hi everyone, welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. It is September 7th, 2017. Here on Tokyo on Fire, we delve into political issues that have contemporary importance to you who live here or who are doing business with Japan. One of the issues that strikes us all the time that is a really electric issue is a snap election that is called by the Prime Minister of Japan. He has that ability, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Michael?
he has a possibility of calling at any time an election. Now, formally, it's the emperor that does that. But what it is the Prime Minister decides it's time for an election for his own either personal political reasons or through pressures from his party that it's time to roll the dice. And then he goes to the emperor, and the emperor dissolves the lower house, the House of Representatives. The upper house can't be dissolved.
Mm-hmm. This is a good advantage, though, isn't it? I mean, it is a powerful advantage, the timing
in the
of
political
call.
language, it's called the Prime Minister's ultimate weapon. That whenever anything happens, either internal dissension within his party, and it's unfortunate I have to use the word his because there have been no women, but when in his party there has been internal dissension or there is a political issue out there that has stymied the diet, or there is a decision that the cabinet has made that is so controversial, and this is the one that Abe has used more than once, that he has to go to the voters to get their opinion of what has happened.
Or, for example, he just scored a big hit and he wants everybody to say, yes, you're on the right track. At a time when his opposition is in disarray, he comes in, he cleans the clock.
That's right. Those are all good reasons for a prime minister, in this case Prime Minister Abe, to call an election. So everyone's saying, so when are you going to do it?
Right.
And that's because his term as president of the LDP ends in September of next year.
Right.
The next House of Representatives election has to happen by December of next year. There's a 3-month gap there. He could wait until he gets reelected. If he gets reelected, he'd be the first one reelected a second time, elected to a third term. And then go into an election saying, what do you think of me as the president of the LDP? That's one of the scenarios.
Right. And we haven't talked about a snap election on Tokyo on Fire for maybe 4 months.
That's because his ratings, his personal popularity ratings, not so much the parties, but his cabinet's ratings have been in the dumpster.
Right. But also there's this biorhythm about timing and advantage, and you want to call a snap election at a time that other things are going on at the same time. They're already on the calendar.
That's right. But in this case, he doesn't have a calendar item. The first thing that he used to justify his first snap election was, I have just delayed the imposition of the rise in the consumption tax.
Right.
What do you think, voters? Now, everybody says, God, that is such a limp thing to do. First of all, you promised that you would raise the consumption tax on time. Then you reneged on that promise. And now you're saying that this was a bold decision that you have made to not raise people's taxes. But it worked. Mm-hmm. It worked fantastically. But the next rise in the consumption tax, the delay that has happened, is delayed twice. The next uptick is not until 2019 in October. And so he can't use that as an excuse.
Right.
He can't put it off because it's not going to happen anytime during his current presidential term.
The last time, sorry to interrupt you, the last time this was a conversation piece was the meeting he was going to have on the Northern Territories. He was hoping he was going to come back with a victory, and then he was going to call a snap election towards December of Christmas time, January. That didn't happen. He came back with his hat in his hand.
Yeah, we were discussing it all through the summer last year. Here's the setup.
Right.
A super summit with Putin, gets something on paper regarding a peace treaty, and then says to the voters, what do you think?
Right.
But he, of course, got nothing out of the summit except a lot of waiting for Putin to show up.
He's been waiting for an opportunity, and then the Tokyo Metropolitan Government elections didn't go his way.
The
Moritomo
Gakuen scandal erupted, and then the Kake Gakuen scandal erupted, and his popularity ratings, which have been historically high, eroded away.
Right.
And so timing when do I call the election, has suddenly became completely jumbled.
Right.
And now we're looking at, okay, what if it's not about Abe? What if it's the LDP itself that is the motive force?
Right.
And that's why we're talking about a sudden snap election at the time of the by-elections of October 22nd.
Right. His reconfiguration of the cabinet really sent a strong signal to us that this is actually what he's doing. He's bolstering the LDP. He's put Mr. Kishida, formerly the foreign minister, into the top shot.
Policy research,
in the LDP.
Brought Taro Kono, an outsider, into the foreign minister's spot.
His approval rate, sure.
And Noda Seiko into the government as well. Critics of him, rivals of him, into the government. It's now a cabinet of rivals.
Right. And the approval ratings have reflected that. Not greatly, but he's achieved a couple of points.
He's done pretty well in terms of a small rebound in the cabinet numbers. The cabinet is seen as much more solid, especially since he lost Inada Tomomi from it, his own personal acolyte, who turned out to have been a lead weight on his administration. That has all been cleaned up. And, okay, now it wouldn't be Abe for his convenience, for his career, but simply we have the opposition in absolute shambles. Maehara has blown the relaunch of his party in a scandal that we've discussed.
We should have an episode on that.
We certainly should. But the new Tokyo First Party isn't there yet. I'm sorry, the Japan First Party isn't there yet. The Tokyo First Party does exist. This is the time for the LDP.
Right.
Maybe not. It's not convenient for Abe, but we, the LDP, will do well enough. And the only question is, will the ruling coalition get enough seats to maintain its 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives that it needs for constitutional revision?
Right.
And my guess is it's a shoo-in. But other commentators see that there's a question. And if indeed Abe loses that 2/3 majority, is he no longer viable since he's so committed and so identified with the constitutional revision story?
It's interesting that Ichiro Ozawa has now come up again and started talking publicly about, the Abe administration and how we as a coalition in opposition need to stay tight.
Ozawa is a really interesting character in that he is incapable of seeing how he affects politics, but he's very, very aware about how everything else works out. And he's a wonderful person to follow on Twitter because he says such salient things. He doesn't say it in his own name; it's put out in his office's name, but it's him.
Right.
And yeah, he's right about this concept that the opposition needs to stick together and stay together because the LDP has such incredible advantages. He should know. He was Secretary General of the LDP. He knows how that thing works.
Clearly a political genius.
He tried to reform the DPJ into a party just like the LDP in terms of its connections to local affairs, and did so and won in 2009. It was the only time the opposition has ever won. He knows what he's talking about.
Yes, he does.
But he's also unable to see that people hate him and would never, and anything he touches turns immediately to mud. Okay. The interesting thing about the possibilities of election are that it would, if there were an early election, it would solve a problem that exists with the Komeito. And this is really inside baseball.
But Komeito is all for it too.
Yeah, but it's all for it too. But there's a problem if there's an extraordinary diet session in the fall. One of the items on the government docket, not on the private legislators' docket, on the government docket is the follow-up legislation on casinos. The legislation that will make it possible for integrated resorts to come together. Now, that legislation, when it was proposed last year by Hosoda and his team, that was a legislator's bill. The government wanted nothing to do with it. And it split the Komeito. Half of the Komeito voted for it, half of the Komeito voted against it, which normally in parliamentary politics means the party splits as well. But the Komeito, because of its religious makeup, stayed together. But it absolutely fractured and fried its internal cohesion and also its relationship to the mothership, the Soka Gakkai. This time, a government bill on gambling is coming up in the fall extraordinary session. It again will knock the Komeito silly. And how can the Komeito stay in the coalition if it's constantly being broken and having to choose either to go for or against the government?
Right. Okay, so looking at this in terms of predicting what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks, that's a very limited period of time. The Prime Minister or the administration has to do something rather dramatic if in fact they're going to call a snap election so that they can say, see this is what we did this too.
I think it's simpler than that. I think it's Abe looking at the morning newspaper and saying, wow, that's what Mr. Trump said, and whoa, that's what Kim Jong-un did today. And he closes the newspaper and says, no election this week, and he'll be entirely fine with everything. And I think that's the only thing he can do. He has a world that's in chaos. And he is seen internationally and also domestically as a source of stability.
He sure does.
And darn it, why waste that?
Right.
And that, I think, is what's going to be the main pillar and the post of what he does.
If we pass this opportunity, then we go into November, December, the end of the year. We're into the new period, the new diet session.
The regular diet session, which will not be interrupted because it decides on the budget, will not be interrupted by an election.
A next snap election possibility would be around this time next year.
Or it'd have to be before, because around this time next year is just 2 weeks before the party congress that's going to pick who is going to be the president of the LDP.
Right. Okay. The only other thing that might entice the Prime Minister is what he does with North Korea. He has received a couple of ticks of being stand-up-ish. He's been rather firm in his dealings with the North Korea situation and his talks with President Trump. So maybe he sees that as an attractive option.
But I don't see how that's going to in any way, in fact, it's very much a negative toward throwing Japan into turmoil by a national election.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.